Hello everyone, I am back with the next two chapters. First off, we have chapter 11, and this is called A Bend in the River. I didn't ever think we'd be friends, said Goldie, hoping for a long log, hopping on a log to a stone. She darted to a patch of buttercups and picked a handful. I didn't either, I said. Our reunion seemed to renew Goldie's boisterous energy, making her as dizzying and annoying as ever, but I took it all in stride. Goldie said we were friends. No one except Rump had ever called me that, and I found it gave me sort of a warm, sweet feeling inside. Everyone told me to stay away from you because of your name. She twirled a buttercup between her fingers, and also because they said you're a witch, of course. But I think that just goes to show they didn't really know you. You're a little scary at first, but mostly because you frown a lot. I frown a lot? Yes, you're frowning now, Goldie said, spinning around to me. Then skipped ahead of me. She was like a hummingbird. She darted this way and that, taking 20 steps for every one of mine, and prattling 100 words for each of mine. She was a girl who magnified and multiplied everything, and yet it had a backward effect on exhausting me while energizing her. I'm hungry, said Goldie. Do you have any food? Catch. I tossed a few of the berries from my apron pocket, and they all bounced off her face. Almost. Try again. I threw this one berry, and Goldie caught it in her mouth. I rewarded her with a handful, which she promptly devoured. Do you think you can sense red things like I sense golden things, I said? She asked, juice running down her mouth. Maybe. I never really thought about this, but it seemed reasonable. I did find a lot of wild raspberries and strawberries and plums, but I always assumed they were plentiful in the woods, and easy to find, and it had little to do with destiny. Destiny wasn't something I was so certain about anyway. I knew names were powerful, and sometimes things happened that we had no control over, but disliked the idea that I could determine my own future. I wanted to decide for myself how things would go for me. I suppose that was why I was here now, searching for Magic Well, because Destiny had delivered bad news. I was going to give Destiny a good punch in the face. I'm still hungry, said Goldie, when the berries were gone. Maybe we can catch some fish. She started toward the water. Don't be stupid, I said. Don't you remember the sprites? Goldie growled. I remember them. I just thought some fish would be nice. I looked away, remorse needling me. I'm sorry. I thought you might have forgotten. Well, I didn't. I'll never forget anything. She lifted her chin and walked faster. So I walked faster, too. And then she went faster, so I went faster. And then Goldie ran and I ran. We raced down the river. I pulled ahead of her. I was pretty proud of myself until... swoop! I sank into the ground to my knees. Goldie stopped short, just short of the mud puddle. Golly glops, what a mess! She plugged her nose. It smelled like goat dung, and it looked like it too, sort of brownish green with streaks of yellow. A toad croaked and hopped away. I clearly invaded her home. While I had no objection to leaving, I pulled my legs up, but one shoe stayed in the mud. I had to dig down to get it out. It came loose with a great squelchy slurp and sputtered mud all over my face. Goldie stifled her laugh, so I grabbed a handful of mud and flung it to her. She stopped laughing. I chuckled and pulled myself free of the bog, and then a glob of mud smacked me on the back of the head. I felt the mud drip down my hair. I turned around to Goldie. She was brushing her hands and satisfied with a smirk. You know what this means, don't you? I said. What? Goldie said, shifting nervously. War. I flung 2 handfuls of mud. She shrieked and stumbled toward the muck, but as soon as she came back up, she lobbed an apronful of mud in my face. I gagged and sputtered. You have a little something on your face, said Goldie. That's funny. You have a little something everywhere, I lunged at her and tackled her into the mud. We rolled this way and that while the mud squished and squelched with such a range of pitches it was nearly musical. The smell was vile, but it didn't keep us from smearing mud in each other's faces, laughing so hard we couldn't stop. Look, said Goldie, a bend in the river. She was right. The river was bending to the left, which was probably what had formed this bog in the first place. We slogged our way out of the mud, soggy and smelly as rotting fish guts, but neither of us minded. I didn't think I'd laughed quite that much since the last time my friend Rump lived on the mountain. Goldie put her muddy arm through mine, and we walked through the river, our footsteps squelching in a beautiful, cheerful rhythm. By early afternoon, we found a rock shaped like a fish. Its carved body was poised as though jumping out of the water, just as the dwarf had said. Which way? Said Goldie. The dwarf said north, and we're going west. I think so. I tried to get my bearings, but it wasn't at all certain until something whispered in my ear. A yellow leaf drifted past me, floating along an invisible path. Follow the nymph, I said. We walked around a narrow ledge of mountainside and gave way to a steep rocky hillside and finally smoothed to a great thick woods dotted with stones, gravestones. We instantly slowed, weary of the lay ahead. The graveyard looked ancient. Some of the stones were crumbling, covered in lichen, and the names etched in them were barely unreadable from so many years of rain and wind and snow. I couldn't help but study the names as I passed. Agatha, Belinda, Jacob, Bernard. My skin prickled as I read. People who had once been alive were now dead and buried in this ground. Nothing but bones and dirt. No matter how rich or poor, or how powerful or helpless, they all died. I don't like graveyards, said Goldie. There's nothing to be afraid of, I said, though my own voice trembled. What if we see a ghost? Then we must hope it's a friendly one. Bertha, Hugo, Klaus. The trees began to whisper. Do you hear that? Goldie said. Shh. The whispering grew louder like a wind. It's a ghost, said Goldie. It's not a ghost. It's the tree nymphs. They seemed excited, or at least they were louder than I ever heard them before. Granny said when people die, the tree nymphs soak up all their memories and whisper their ancient secrets and wisdom to all who hear and listen. I walked between the gravestones, tilting my ears toward the trees. Rosamond, Sigmund, Guido. I could almost hear the nymphs saying names aloud with their tiny clicks and whispers. Then the nymphs took flight, all the leaves rustling from the branches at once. They swirled around us, hundreds of them, thousands maybe. Surely I would catch one. I jumped and clapped my hands over the nymphs. I tried to use my cloak as a net, but they evaded me at every turn. Then they all swarmed around me, tugging my cloak and hair. They did the same to Goldie, pulling us further into the graveyard, where more tree nymphs rose off their branches. Finally, they swirled around into the sky like a funnel, leaving all the surrounding trees bare and lifeless as the graveyard. And beyond the trees lay the treasure we were seeking, a well. That takes us to chapter 12. This is called Well, Wine, and Witch. The well didn't look magical. It was overgrown with weeds and thistles, and the stones were cracked and crumbled. Do you think this well is right? Goldie asked. I was doubtful, except we had followed the dwarf's directions exactly, and everything else matched his description. There's only one way to be certain, I said. I walked to the well and leaned over the edge. The bottom was black as a cave at midnight, and I couldn't smell anything at all. I turned, and the rusty stile on the bucket lowered down. There was a plish. I heaved the bucket and looked inside. Goldie gasped. It's wine! Red wine! The nymphs swirled on the roof of the well, whispering excitedly. This had to be the wine well. I felt the tingling feeling I get when there's magic around. Surely this would restore Granny's magic, her life, her youth. Do you think we should drink some? Said Goldie. The dwarf said it would restore youth. We're already young. I just need to bring some back for Granny. How are you going to carry it? Goldie asked. I hadn't considered that. I had nothing in which to carry the wine. But then there was another rush and swirl of nymphs, and what I assumed was a nearby grove of trees revealed to be a house. At least that was left of one. It was a large manor, most certainly abandoned. The shutters were clipped and hangers off their hinges. Dead ivy climbed the walls and frame, and their stone chimney was half standing. It doesn't seem like anyone lives here, said Goldie. No, I said. Perhaps there might be a bottle or a jug inside. Yes, I said, though neither of us moved. A few nymphs settled over the roof of the dilapidated house, making it look like more overgrown than it had, and haunted. You go first, said Goldie. I walked slowly to the door. It was cracked and chipped. The knob and hinges were orange with rust. I think we should knock. It's the polite thing to do. Yes, of course. We couldn't go barging into other people's houses. I gave a quick rap on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again, and the door fell inward. Clouds of dust billowed up as it crashed to the floor. I covered my mouth with my cloak, and the dust settled. I don't think anyone's home, I said. Except maybe ghosts, said Goldie. We walked slowly inside, and the floorboards creaked beneath our feet. It must have been a grand house once. It looked as though it had been abandoned centuries ago. Everything was covered in thick layers of dust from the floor to ceiling. Walls, nooks, candlesticks, festooned with cobwebs and drapes and tapestries, had been eaten away by moths. A dining table was set for two with fine china and silver and crystal goblets, as though the inhabitants had just sat down to a special supper and then, poof, disappeared, leaving their meal to rot and collect dust. And then there was a wine bottle, too, with a cork. I took the bottle off the table. It was empty. When I turned to Goldie, she screamed. An owl was perched on the edge of the fireplace. He turned his head and looked right at us with one amber eye. "Hello, Owl," I said. "Who, said the owl. "What did he say?" Goldie said. "He said it's not polite to barge into other people's houses." "Oh, is this his house then?" Goldie asked. Who? "No, he said owls aren't people." "Oh, yes, well, of course then. Whose house is it?" "Albert," said a small voice. "Is that you?" Goldie and I gasped as the figure emerged from the cobweb corner. It was a woman, thin and pale as mist. She had draped in dust and cobwebs like a forgotten figure on a shelf. The only bit of color was in her lips, glistening red. Goldie clutched my arm. "It's a ghost!" "A ghost?" said the woman. "No, they call me the Well Witch, whoever they are, though I don't prefer to be called a witch. It sounds ugly and old, and I'm neither." It was difficult to tell how old she was. She had the air of something ancient, like old books, dusty and worn and with edges. Her skin was like yellowing paper, yet her voice was high and thin, almost childish. She could have been 20 or 100. "Have you seen Albert?" she asked. "Who's Albert?" I asked. "My love. He should have been home for supper by now. He wasn't well lately, you see, and I have the most delicious wine to revive him." In her hands held a crystal goblet, empty but for a petal of red at the bottom, just the color of her lips. "Is that the wine from the well?" I asked. "Yes, it's the most delicious wine," she said. "I was told that wine can make you young again." "Yes, it does. When Albert grew old and took sick, I devoted all my powers to restoring youth and vitality." "And it works?" I said, feeling hope fluttering inside of me. "Oh, yes. As you see, I'm quite young. I've been young forever." As she spoke, her face seemed to shift. It was subtle, but the thought of her nose swelled a little, and her lips thin, possibly just the shadows. "May I take some of your wine?" The woman glided to the table and picked up another wineglass. "Follow me," she said. In the sunlight, the woman looked older than before. She had some lines around her mouth, and her eyes had crow's feet. "I was old myself once," she said, her voice just a little raspier. "I can hardly remember anything from the old life, except that Albert was sick. He'll be well again once he has some wine. Where is he? He's always slipping away from me." I looked around, wondering if Albert was as strange and dusty as this woman. She dipped her goblet into the bucket and brought forth the wine. "Anyone who drinks the well will not die, but regain their youthful strength and beauty. I will gladly share it with you. I think everyone should have it." "We don't need it," I said. "We're already young." "Yes, of course. Someday, perhaps. Sooner than you imagine. Aging happens so quickly, it seems. One day you'll feel it creeping on your skin like spiders." As she said this, wrinkles appeared on her eyes, and the folds around her mouth deepened as though an invisible sculptor was etching it into her face. "It's terrible feeling to grow old," she said. Her shoulders hunched. "Old age, sickness, and death, they're curses. Eternal youth is the greatest power anyone can have. Don't you agree?" Her breathing was raspy and labored. Brown spots appeared on her skin, and the veins darkened and rose in her hands. Goldie nodded. Of course we agree. Now I must drink. I can feel myself withering away." The woman, an old crone, took a drink long and deep, and as she did, the years seemed to melt away. The brown spots faded, her skin smoothed, and her shoulders straightened. The tree nymphs rushed all around, clicking and whispering silently as the woman drained the goblet, almost as though they were being revived as well. By the time she emptied the goblet, the woman was young again. "Great ghost," said Goldie. "That's incredible." The young woman started. "Oh, where did you two come from?" She looked between us as though we had appeared from thin air. Goldie and I looked at each other. "We've been here all along. We came for some of your wine. I wanted to take it to my granny. She's sick." "Sick? Albert was sick. He should have been home by now. Have you seen him?" "Not since we've been here. Something odd had just happened." The hair at the nape of my neck prickled. "What's your name?" I asked. "You've never told us." "My name?" said the woman. "Well, they call me the Well Witch, whoever they are. though I don't prefer to be called a witch. It sounds old and ugly, and I'm neither. But the other name, what name were you born with? Born with? I was never born. I've lived forever, you see, and I have no name. Names are for mere mortals, things that grow old and die. I do neither because of the wine. It's quite delicious. She sipped some more and began, this time, revived itself. Her cheeks turned round and rosy and her waist slender, and she shrank a few inches, and now she looked about 15 or 16. Goldie was transfixed. Red, I think I know how to make Mummy love me again, she whispered. But before I could ask how, the woman noticed us and gave us a start. Oh, where did you two come from? The cold feeling set into ice as I realized exactly what was happening. The wine had made her young again, but it had also taken away her memories. It turned back time, and only for her, and the tree nymphs soaked up the memories that she lost with each sip. We came for the wine, Goldie said. We want to have some. Of course, everyone should have some. She held out the wine goblet and Goldie reached for it, but I yanked her back. Don't, I said. The wine erased her memory. She doesn't remember us. I know, Goldie said, but don't you see, if I drink some of this wine, then I'll be little again. And Mummy adored me when I was little. She said I was the most precious thing in the world. She turned back to the Well-Witch. Can the wine make me younger than I am now? Of course, young and beautiful. That's why I made it. Old age and death are the greatest curse of the world. Now you can break the curse. She held it out to Goldie. Goldie wrapped her fingers around the stem. Was the wine so bad? Maybe if I gave Granny just a sip, it wouldn't make her forget too much. Just a few years. She'd still remember me, but she'd be well. She wouldn't die, but how much wine could I give her before she'd forget me? That would almost be worse than death, for Granny to live and not know who I was. Goldie lifted the goblet to her lips. Goldie, no! I lunged, and I slapped the goblet away, and it fell to the ground and broke in two. Oh, what a pity! That was my best goblet. I watched this wine seep into the ground, my heart pounding as it shriveled. Weeds turned to unnatural green colors. Come on, let's go. I grabbed Goldie's hand, but she pulled away and looked at me as if I was a troll. Who are you? I looked closely at Goldie's lips. They were red and glistening. A tree nymph was perched on her shoulder. Curses. Goldie had swallowed some of the wine. And that takes us to chapter 13. I hope you enjoyed. I'll talk to you later. Bye.